I mean, the Pakistani government is 100, and the parliament voted 100% to support the giving control to the Taliban. I don't know what can be done. I mean, there are very courageous people trying to counteract it, and we shouldn't be supporting them. We've really created a hideous situation. So I think it's maybe the most dangerous country in the world. I mean, there's also a military doctrine that has to be undercut. I mean, the ISI, the intelligence services, which are extremely powerful, essentially since the 80s, they have a strategic doctrine, which is that Pakistan needs a strategic reserve behind it to protect it in a war with India. I mean, just on military grounds, I think that's totally insane. But that is their doctrine. And that's the justification, motivation they give for supporting the Taliban. I mean, they don't say we support the Taliban, but everyone knows they do. And that's the justification. We have to make sure that we keep control of at least eastern Afghanistan. In case we go to war with India. If they go to war with India, both countries will be destroyed, so it doesn't make any difference. But and the military is designed to fight a war with India, and not to control the tribal territories. There's a lot more to say. Like these drone attacks, you know, they have consequences, sometimes severe consequences. So one of the most conflicted areas, in so-called tribal areas, is that there are problems with huge fighting going on. But the militants there say that, you know, what got them started was a drone attack. A U.S. drone attack hit a madrasa and killed about 80 people. Okay, here it doesn't even make the news. But for the people there, you know, hitting a school and killing 80 students is not a joke. So they react. And it's the same answer. And the more of these assassination attempts there are, killing civilians, of course, the worse it will be. And I'm stepping around. I mean, I'd like to know if you think there's anything that can be done, since you know more about it than I do.
If you know about Iftikhar Chaudhry being reinstated with the lawyers' movement, I was curious about what you think about that and about this Supreme Justice being reinstituted.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Anybody else?
Do you think that the lawyers' movement has any impact?
An impressive movement, but you know, I think we should support it. They did manage to get the Chief Justice back.
The latest development.
You know, how far that can go, I don't know. I mean, there are terrible problems inside the country. I mean, the Punjab region tends to support the army. That's where it comes from, and it's the biggest, most powerful part. And Balochistan is a revolution going on. So it's how this can be patched together.
Thank you.
Dr. Chomsky, it's a pleasure to meet you. I agree with much of what you say, and I loved your movie Manufacturing Consent and your writings. This is kind of a difficult question for me to articulate, and I'm asking it because of what you said about the invasion of Afghanistan being one of the biggest crimes. Before 9/11, I remember reading about the government in Afghanistan and being horrified by what I read. And I really thought, this is a government that should not exist. How does that factor into, I mean, sometimes breaking the law, we all break the law sometimes. Sometimes it's necessary. I mean, what if Hitler hadn't invaded any countries, but he was committing the Holocaust? Should we break international law to take care of a situation like that? Because I supported the invasion of Afghanistan, and I know we did it. We minimized the amount of loss of life, despite what you said about the estimations of the possible loss of life. And I supported the removal of the Taliban government. I wonder if you can talk about this. It's a conflict in my mind.
Now, it's a fair question, except for the fact that the overthrowing the Taliban government was not a worry.
It was for me.
Maybe for you, but it was not for the U.S. government. The official, read Bush's speeches on October 7th. He said, unless you hand over Osama bin Laden to us, we're going to bomb you. Nothing about overthrowing the Taliban. In fact, the U.S. had been working with the Taliban up until they were friends. In fact, they were talking with them about building a pipeline and so on. But then in the late 90s, and a couple of years later, the U.S. didn't like them. And they didn't like Osama bin Laden, obviously, and Al-Qaeda. And they said, okay, hand those guys over to us, or we're going to bomb you. The first mention of overthrowing the Taliban government was 3 weeks after the bombing. Okay. And furthermore, leading opponents of the Taliban in Afghanistan, very brave people, including U.S. favorites, were bitterly condemning the bombing. They said, you're just bombing because you want to show off your muscle. You're undermining our ability to overthrow the Taliban from within, which is what we want to do. So, carrying out a war and remember, you evaluate actions on the basis of expected consequences, not on the basis of actual consequences. Expected consequences are what you use for a moral evaluation. Okay, what do these guys think they're doing? That's their moral evaluation. Well, what they thought they were doing is taking a serious risk of killing 2.5 million people in order to force the Taliban to hand somebody to us where we refuse to provide evidence because they're too lowly for us to even consider. And in fact, acting to undermine the anti-Taliban efforts of the leading elements and even our favorite guys like Abdul Haq within Afghanistan. I think that's a major crime. Take the Holocaust. Did the U.S. do anything about it? I mean, the U.S. didn't attack Germany. The U.S. didn't go to war until Japan attacked the U.S. and then Germany declared war. The war had almost nothing to do with the Holocaust. In fact, if you look at the war itself, it was the Russians who were fighting the Germans. I mean, the U.S. was providing them with aid, but we didn't even invade the continent until D-Day, 1944. The massive war against the Germans was the Russians. The U.S. and Britain were fighting around the periphery, basically to preserve the British Empire and the U.S. takeover of it. There were ways to help Holocaust victims. So, for example, they could have been, first of all, the war could have been prevented. Like in 1938, the United States